All right, folks, we are live for our Saturday night cap here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. Back again. I am merely the somewhat capable host, T.J. Rives. I've got my wingman, my former XM and Sirius XM, Fox Sports Radio, tune in, brother from another mother. Hello, Ari Russell with me on a Friday night. It is the month of March, my friend. We are all about college hoops this month, leading all the way to the Final Four in San Antonio. How are you?
Saturday night, you mean?
Yes, Saturday night.
You went back in time.
Yeah, all I know is this is the best month out of the year.
Oh, yeah.
March. You would agree with me on that, and we got a lot of craziness, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It's March 1st, and we're getting rolling. Conference play is starting to wind down in the major conferences. Next week, I think we're going to start getting, next weekend perhaps, some of the early tournaments for the smaller leagues are going to be coming up, and the bids are going to start rolling in. So we're getting there, man. It's come upon us really fast.
No doubt. A lot to cover and go over. I want to tell you here in a few minutes, Adam Zagoria will be with us. I talked to Adam a little while ago. He was in the house. Ari, you're in New York. Adam was right there in the Garden. It has happened. St. John's has won the outright Big East championship for the first time in 40 years. They had already garnered a share of the title going into this game with Seton Hall. They won the game by 10 today. They're the outright champs. They're the beast of the Big East right now. Adam will talk more about that. Just say a quick word about that. I mean, you and I have been talking for a couple of weeks on and off the air about it. They have finished it off with a couple of games to spare.
Oh, yeah. They locked it in. No tie at this point, all by themselves. Get the 1 seed, get the regular season Big East crown. First time in a long time. He brought the program back. I mean, now St. John's is there. They're a legit contender at this point. Winning the Big East. Again, Pitino in year 2, showing what he does in year 2 at every stop. He wins everywhere he goes, and this is kind of was something that we talked about when he was in Iona, that St. John's, when that job opened up, you knew that he was going to probably be the head coach. They brought him on board, and look at it. They win the conference championship regular season in year 2, and they look legitimate. And this is a really good basketball team, well coached, and again, he's a mastermind of the sport. And one of the all-time greats.
No doubt. Adam will talk more about it, and they are legit on defense, as you and I have been talking about. There's some questions about their outside shooting, but right now they look the part. They look the part of a contender, certainly to be in San Antonio. I want to ask you big picture before we get to Adam.
Right.
And by the way, later on in the program, Vince Ferrara will be here. Ari, Vince from the sports station in Knoxville, 99.1, the Sports Animal. He's the morning host. He's also on the Tennessee Vols broadcast, pre- and post-game show. What a wild finish with their win over Alabama. Tennessee angling maybe to be a number 1 seed, certainly in the hunt to be a number 2 seed. What a win for them. So Vince will be here later on. I want to talk about the top team in the SEC. Auburn clobbered Kentucky today. Just tell me a little more about what you see out of Auburn. They appear at this point, I'm going to talk more with Adam about it. I want your opinion right now. They appear to be the number 1 overall seed right now before we ever even play the SEC tournament. Would you agree with that? What are your thoughts after they won decisively at Kentucky, which is, I believe, their 15th quad 1 win? Hello.
Yeah, I mean, they're dominating this historically great conference. They're beating everybody. I mean, it's the only team that knocked them off, which was Florida. But ever since that game, they just, going into Kentucky's home, winning there, obviously beating Alabama on their court. They're winning at home. They're winning on the road. They're beating everybody. Just a complete team, obviously player of the year candidate on their team. But it's not just him. They've got depth. They've got defense. They can shoot from the outside. They can drive on you. Just tremendous amount of athleticism on the wings, get good rebounds. It's everything. They are starting to separate themselves, amongst the elite teams right now that are going to be the heavier favorites. Now, there's a lot of good teams that could make the Final Four, but we're starting to see some teams. Of course, you never know what's going to happen. There's always upsets that happen in a bad day, and someone else has a tremendous day. It happens every single year. But from what we're looking at this point, Auburn is really up there amongst the favorites to win the whole thing this year. They're starting to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. They're not alone, but it's starting to see a few teams here that we'll talk about throughout this show that are starting to do it. And it's not many, but Auburn is definitely one of them. And probably
we would put Duke in that category.
Absolutely.
We would put Houston in probably in that category. Those three.
Those are the three.
Yes.
Those three, in my opinion, are the teams that are starting to separate themselves from everybody else. Again, the tournament has to be played. You never know what's going to happen. But from what we're looking at right now and the domination and the way that they're beating teams and just, Duke, I mean, they're beating the crap out of everybody. I mean, they're winning by 30, 40 points. Again.
Right.
It's insane. Obviously Clemson knocked them off. Clemson's another team that's really rolling as well. So, but they're not at that Duke level. Duke and Auburn at this point, in my opinion, and Duke beat Auburn in Auburn.
That is correct. That's correct.
So you're looking at, I had a chance to see Duke play on Tuesday, not in person, but watch the game against Miami. I wanted to, as a Miami Hurricane alum, I wanted to be sadistic for an hour and a half, and it worked because they got pummeled as expected by Duke, but Duke just is a complete team. They've got the outside shooters and Evans coming off the bench because Proctor got hurt. Evans had a big game today, 18, but he hit like 5 threes in a row against Miami, so they've got the depth, they've got the size.
And Cooper Flagg even went out of the game tonight with Florida State for about 10, 12 minutes. He had gotten hit in the head, then he got poked in the eye. He went to the locker room. They didn't miss a beat with Evans, with Kneppel, the freshman, hitting shots. Malawatch, the other freshman that's a possible lottery pick.
Yeah, he has another guy that you can't get shots off of because he's always blocking he's always out there protecting the rim. They just have the makeup of a team. And defensively, another team, that really good defensively last year. This year they have much more parts from that. Cooper Flagg is 6'10", but he's kind of a 2 guard. So they just have a lot of length on the wings that makes it very difficult to get off clean shots, and they're really aggressive when it comes to putting pressure on the ball. So, and that's Jay Lucas, who is a candidate to become the next Miami head coach, possibly. And he's their defensive coordinator, and we've seen them move up. I think they're ranked 4th in the nation overall composite defense, however they put that together. But that's what's going to win the championships. Auburn has another very aggressive defense. So, you're dealing with 2 teams that are really starting to pull away. And then the third is definitely Houston. They're really, I think they won 19 of 20 or 20 of 21 at this point. It's just in a very tough conference. They're starting to show to me that this is a legit contender as well, Houston.
We'll talk more about Houston in a little bit. That's the voice of Ari Russell. If you're only hearing us on podcast, I didn't say this at the beginning of the show. We're also a podcast after the fact. Come find the video show through YouTube, through Facebook, the CBB Coast to Coast Twitter handle. Follow him at Ari Russell, ARIRUSSELL. How's my spelling on a Saturday night? Find me at Buck Sideline Guy, BUC. Buck Sideline Guy on social media. The show streaming here on Saturday night. Saturday Nightcap will be here all through March, all through the Final Four, going over all of these games. Championship week, we're going to be here on the platforms. NCAA tournament nights, those Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights, we're going to be here on college basketball coast to coast. So subscribe, be following us. Find us for the live coverage. We love the interaction. Send us some comments. If you're watching us live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter X, send us some comments. We'll get to those. Ari, without further delay, let's talk more about the St. John's win. We're going to be all over the board on college basketball coast to coast. We'll go east to west. Our buddy Matt Zemek will join us later in the evening as well, the West Coast Bureau Chief. He will be here. By the way, my other wingman, Jason Powers, not available tonight because he's actually in Phoenix working his Monday through Friday job. Actually, his Monday through Saturday job is with the National Football League now and their flag football initiative. Turns out he's in Phoenix. He and Zemek went and had some lunch without us, Ari. So Jason's been working all day and this evening, so he's not able to be with me. You're here helping me out, but Matt Zemek will be here later tonight. for the coverage of everything West and whatever else is on his mind. Again, he's monitoring Juju Watkins and the USC women playing UCLA. Two of the top teams in women's college basketball are playing tonight. Matt with the Trojans Wire website and the College Wire website has his eyes on that game. He's also monitoring the men's college games tonight as well. He'll be here in a little bit. But Ari, stand by without further delay. Let's you and I hear from Adam Zagoria. He was in the house in Madison Square Garden for the St. John's win today, the historic win today. They've locked up the Big East. He's got thoughts on that, the conference overall, and a lot more. So let's go to the conversation I had with him just a little earlier this evening as Adam joined us to break down the St. John's win and the rest of the Big East. As promised, here he is. He was there. You saw it with your own eyes, Adam Zagoria. The St. John's Red Storm first outright Big East regular season title in 40 years, since 1985, as they outlasted Seton Hall. All right, better than me talk a bunch about it. Set the scene for us. What was it like? It was, they had a little problem in the first half. They eventually overcame Seton Hall, but what was it like in the Garden to witness this today?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a situation where St. John's came in, TJ, as a 21.5-point favorite. You know, Seton Hall's in last place in the Big East. Obviously, we got a big story up here where Kadari Richmond, who was the number one player in the portal, transferred from Seton Hall to St. John's to play for Rick Pitino. And that's been kind of a dominant storyline for both teams all season. And Kadari said going into the game, he wasn't really too excited about clinching a Big East regular season championship against his former team because he's got friends and coaches over there. So St. John's went in as a big favorite. Seton Hall hung around the whole game. They were only down 4 at the half. It was close down the stretch. St. John's pulled away, and, you know, then the confetti dropped, and they gave him a trophy. The Big East, Dan Leibowitz from the Big East, gave St. John's a trophy, and it's really remarkable. This is year 2 of Rick Pitino. Everybody knows that he's got a track record in his second year at every stop of dramatically improving the team. You know, they've won the Big East for the first time in 40 years. I mean, there's some crazy numbers on this guy. This guy has now led 5 different schools, TJ, to a regular season league championship. And this is the 6th different school he's taken to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Now, he did say something interesting, and you were writing this on NJ.com and the Zags blog. They were not going to cut the nets down with the ladders. Yeah, they had the confetti. They had the trophy. The conference wanted to do that. But he has bigger aspirations, just in year 2, bigger aspirations than let's cut the nets down for a regular season title, right?
Yeah, I think that was a story at my colleague Zach Braziller at the New York Post. You know, sometimes writers need something to write about. So he wrote the other day that St. John's should cut the nets down after a regular season championship. Rick tends to poll his players on these things, ask them what they want to do. So Pitino asked his team. They said no. You know, they still have a game against Marquette this week. And obviously their bigger goals are to cut down the nets at the Big East tournament in a couple weeks, where they secure the number 1 seed. And then obviously to make a deep run in March Madness.
Yeah, that would be the idea behind it. Okay, again, full credit to St. John's for what they have done. I got a couple more subjects on the Big East. So UConn won early in the day at Providence. Also Villanova, Eric Dixon, a big night. They won tonight. But Xavier might be the other big story of the day with what they did to Creighton this afternoon in Cincinnati with a wipeout win in the second half. Zach Fremantle had a huge game. You've seen Xavier. What do we make of that here in Big East play on this Saturday, real quick?
Yeah, I mean, for most of the year, TJ, the thought has been the Big East was just going to get 4 teams in: St. John's, Creighton, Marquette, and UConn. Xavier and Villanova have kind of been on the bubble here for the last month. And Xavier is really kind of knocking the door down. And I think on a bunch of brackets, they're now, you know, last 4 in, that kind of thing. Villanova still, I think, has a chance to get in, but they're going to need some help on the bubble. And look, Sean Miller, everyone knows, tremendous coach, great coach. Like Rick Pitino, has had some some issues in the past, but they've both moved past that, and that's a huge win for them to beat Creighton by 20 plus. And now, of course, it's all about jockeying for seeding in the Big East tournament. St. John's is the 1. UConn right now is the 4, Xavier is the 5, which means that you could have a 4-5 quarterfinal matchup Thursday at the Garden between UConn and Xavier, Dan Hurley, Sean Miller, and then the winner right now would get St. John's on Friday night in the semis.
And again, for Xavier, they had a 10-point loss to St. John's at home back in January, and then also an 8-point loss at St. John's in the second matchup between those two teams. And that is fascinating that the UConn third game could come in a semifinal on Friday night. Stay tuned at the Garden. That would be wild.
Yeah, that'd be a monster game. I mean, we're looking ahead a little bit. It's still possible UConn could move up to to the 3.
Right.
Creighton obviously lost, but Dan Hurley had beaten Rick Pitino 4 times in a row, and now Rick has beaten Danny twice in a row. So if they could play a third time on Friday night in the semis, that would be primetime TV.
Love Adam Zagoria's insight, our insider here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. If you're only hearing us on the podcast after the fact, find all of his stuff at nj.com and the Zags blog. Follow him. Great follow for everything Northeast basketball, the Big East, as well as recruiting. Adam Zagoria, Zagoria, with me for a couple more moments. All right, I'm just putting this out there. I need your quick take. Auburn demolishes Kentucky earlier today for the most part. Duke has won easily tonight. Houston locked up the outright Big 12 title. Do you believe, as we sit here on March 1, those 3 teams are number 1 seeds right now, no matter what else happens? Do you believe everybody else is vying for the other number 1 spot and the other 3 are basically secure? Or maybe you only think it's a couple of those teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think Auburn is pretty much close to locking up the number 1 overall seed. I saw Joe Lunardi tweeted that. Auburn is the best team in the country. Now they do have a loss to Duke at Duke. So if we see these teams again in San Antonio, when you and I are poolside down there, they could meet in the Final Four or the championship game. And then, I think Duke and Houston have gone a long way towards solidifying number 1 seed. Now Tennessee did edge Alabama there in a very close game that went down to the wire. So, that may have knocked Alabama off the 1 line for now. And, you've got teams like Tennessee and
Michigan State would be another one. Florida would be another one, right? But I mean, honestly, Houston has been so good in the Big 12. I think it's tough to argue at this point that even if they were to be upset in the Big 12 tournament, I still think they're likely one of the number 1 seeds. That's me saying that. We'll see for Kelvin Sampson's team here at this point.
I think Auburn, Houston, and Duke are in good position right now. And then, Alabama had been the other number 1, but obviously they took a loss. We have to see what happens in the SEC tournament and, down the stretch here.
And is it a Big 10 team that maybe slides in? Probably not. SEC so strong, but maybe it's Michigan State. We'll see. A lot of basketball still to be played. And this guy's covering it again, nj.com, the Zags blog. My friend, it is March. The month is here. I always love getting with you. It only gets crazier from here, right? One more time, and we're ready for it.
Yeah, it's always great. It's starting to get a little warmer here in New York City in March, and we'll have conference tournament play in another week or so, and it's going to be really exciting. There's no, Auburn and Duke are clearly, I think, the top couple teams, but there's a bunch of teams up there that we've mentioned, and we'll start with the conference tournaments and see how that plays out. But it's going to be a lot of fun for the next month.
It'd be a blast. And we began talking about St. John's. Look out for them. Look out with the coach they have, with the roster they have, the ability to guard. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Let's see how far they can go. Adam, thank you. Always appreciate it with the coverage and everything going on. Thank you for hanging with me on another Saturday night.
All right, my man.
There you go. Adam Zagoria with us just a little earlier this evening. It is College Basketball Coast to Coast Live. T.J. Rives and Ari Russell back with you as we rock on this Saturday night. And I know You love hanging with him whenever the Big East tournament comes around or when we're around each other in and around the Final Four. Does a phenomenal job with recruiting as well. Give me one more thought on what he and I were talking about with the rest of the Big East. The Xavier win over Creighton is the Big East with Marquette included in the mix, with UConn, with Xavier, with Creighton. Is the Big East looking at 4 teams in the NCAA tournament? Do you have a thought on that?
Well, I mean, there's 4 locks already. The question is whether Xavier or Villanova are going to be the 5th team because, St. John's, Creighton, UConn, and Marquette are locked, right? So the question is, what's Xavier going to be like? What's Villanova going to be like? It's tough. Yeah, there's a lot of teams a lot of bubble teams today really stepped on the brakes. So they didn't today. Both Villanova and Xavier both won today. Probably Villanova's. They had some really tough early non-conference losses that were pretty unforgivable, for lack of a better term. And that's going to come back and haunt them come Selection Sunday, I think, unless they make a nice run in the Big East tournament and knock off one of the top 4 teams and possibly get to the finals or win it. So Xavier, I think, has a little bit more of a chance at this point, especially with all the other bubble teams struggling. But it's 4 locked in the Big East right now, and I think that Xavier and Villanova are still trying to make their case, and we'll see. Big East is a tough conference, and it's obviously not as big as the super conferences are, but you've got some great teams in there, and as we've seen, the national championship has gone through the Big East champion or the Big East team quite a few times in the last decade. So we have to say what Villanova's won a couple.
That's
know
right.
That UConn won the last 2. So it's not a conference that obviously you don't really look at the history. They're not supposed to look at the history behind it. But at the end of the day, you can't say that Xavier and Villanova aren't quality teams and probably better than some of these other bubble teams that we're seeing. But unfortunately, I think for them, the SEC is so strong and the Big Ten is so strong as well at this point that it's going to be tough for them. They're going to really have to close out the season really with wins and go deep into the Big East tournament.
And to that point, again, St. John's right now in the net ranking. This is the NCAA's official power ranking. It's not everything. St. John's is 16. Marquette is 24. They won tonight over Georgetown. They have some good wins.
Right.
UConn is 36. The 2-time defending champs will be in. So now the question becomes Creighton at 38, Xavier at 52, who beat Creighton tonight. Are one or both of them, going to be the 4th team? Is there going to be a 5th team? That's the debate in the Big
Creighton's
East.
In. Creighton's going to be in. So
Creighton will be in.
Creighton's
the question, in your mind, the question is Xavier. That's their Xavier. First quad 1 win of the season was tonight, I believe, for that game. So, is it going to be Xavier as the other team in the Big East? All right, so we continue all these different debates here this evening. Let's go over a couple of the scores of the late night games. Florida did win over Texas A&M. They have a case to maybe be one of the number 1 seeds. That was a fairly close game midway through the second half, but Florida pulled away late 89-70. The Duke final over Florida State was 100-65, with Cooper Flagg ending with 16 points, Ari, after not playing for about 10 minutes of the first half, got hit in the head, got poked in the eye, went to the locker room, didn't return in the first half. They still stretched out a 15-plus point lead without him. They go on to win by 35. Their margin of victory in the ACC is averaging like 23 points a game. Margin of victory in the ACC. Maybe that's more of a commentary on how bad the ACC is real quick here for just another second about Duke and the way they're destroying everybody.
It's partially what that is, and it's interesting. I mean, there's 3 teams that are pretty locked that are going to make the tournament in the ACC, and the rest of it are struggling to make it. SMU tonight just, again, walked onto the train tracks and lost on the road to Stanford, who's having a decent year, but so that was a must win for SMU. So they're probably sitting on the outside of the bubble looking in. The three teams, obviously Duke, Clemson, and Louisville are the three locked teams. Clemson is a team that you really got to look out to make a deep run at this point. They're legitimate. They're the only ones that handed Duke a loss in conference at this point. But they're a really good ball team. Louisville, we've seen, has had a great bounce back season, surprisingly so, kind of getting back to the forefront, in college basketball. I don't see them making a deep run, but making the tournament, considering where that program was over the last few years, is remarkable. Then outside of that, I don't know. Wake Forest, I believe they won tonight, but they've had some really bad losses. Yep. North Carolina, we could start talking about them. They're starting to heat up a little bit, getting a win. They won. Who doesn't beat Miami by
I know.
But they won.
North Carolina still only with the one quad one win right now. They've got Duke next Saturday night in the regular season finale, and I believe, just a quick take from you, they've still got to probably beat like a Clemson, Louisville, and/or Duke, and maybe a couple of them at the ACC tournament in Charlotte. They need a couple more wins, maybe 3 more wins to solidify as an at-large. You think so?
No, absolutely. I think they have to beat, beating Duke on Saturday night, a week from tonight, must win for North Carolina. If they don't, they're out unless, of course, they win the ACC tournament, right? But if they do win that game, they're definitely going to have to at least probably get to the final of the ACC tournament in order to make that case for themselves. Because then they'll have at least, at that point, they'll have 3, maybe 4 quad one wins. So that would probably elevate them into the NCAA tournament. But they have they have to perform. They have to win these games, and that's not going to be an easy task. We saw Duke just blow the doors off them in the first game. It's a matchup problem for North Carolina. They're just not talented enough, in my opinion. Can the rivalry game kind of have them step up? Obviously, that can play a role. But North Carolina is really on the outside. They're going to have to win to win on next Saturday.
So many times in this rivalry, though, the unexpected be, and again, Hubert Davis's first year. Back 3 years ago, they stunned Duke and Coach K in a game they were losing for a lot of the game. They stunned him at Cameron and ruined his final game ever at Cameron, as he had already announced his retirement. And then they beat him again in the Final Four. And Hubert Davis will be forever remembered for those 2 bookend wins. So, but they're going to have similar kind of magic at the end of this year, or it's NIT or worse. Probably for North Carolina.
And no one's interested tournament, but
exactly, as you and I have talked about. All right, again, thank you for finding us some live comments coming in here. John is watching. John, thank you. And he says Pitino is a coaching savant. Absolutely. This is 6 teams he's going to take to the NCAA tournament, 6 different programs. 5 of them have won the conference regular season championship. No matter where he goes, it seems to work. And it seems to work fairly quickly. He's been able to make it happen. John also asked the questions about how much does a conference tournament weigh in on seeding. It does, to an extent. I mean, there have been numerous occasions where a team maybe was not in, even without the automatic bid. A couple of wins on the neutral floor help their resume enough to push them across, Ari. So these games on a neutral floor in the power conferences like the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, Big East, you get a couple of wins on the neutral floor, that may be enough to push you across, right?
Yeah, especially this year, I think it's going to be more than other years, perhaps, because there's so much to, like with the super conferences, SEC and Big 10 in particular, but Big 12 as well, to a lesser extent. But those 2 conferences, because of where all these teams are, like it is going to have an effect on seeding, because you're going to have matchups that's going to decide whether, a Florida is going to be a 2 seed or a 1 seed, right? Because if they win the conference tournament, they might catapult up to a 1 seed. But if they lose in the first round, they can end up being a 3 seed. So, there's and then a team like Texas A&M could jump up because they're starting to fall. I think they've lost like 3 straight.
That was their fourth. That was their fourth straight loss tonight against Florida. You're right.
So we saw them. They were on the two line at one point, they might be down at the 5 line at this point. But could they elevate back to a 3 if they get to like the finals
But
of the SEC?
let's give the example. So like North Carolina at the ACC we were talking about,
Right.
Indiana at the Big Ten is another team that we're talking about. In the Big East, Xavier needs a couple of wins maybe at the Garden against somebody like UConn or Creighton again or Marquette to help them out. That's the type of teams we're talking about that could help themselves. Or in the SEC, Arkansas took an awful loss tonight with South Carolina. So maybe they've got to beat 1 or 2 credible teams in Nashville to push them across.
Oklahoma is another team. Texas is another team, right?
Yes.
Nebraska is another team that took one on the chin today. So they're going to have to do some damage in the tournament. So this year in particular, not only just for the bubble, but also even for the higher seeds, I do think that the conference tournaments are going to be very intriguing because it's going to create a level of a shift where I don't think we've seen it like this in previous years. And maybe it's because of the size of the tournament of the conferences now. There's so many teams in the SEC and Big Ten in particular. It's like 1,000 teams in it.
I know.
So yeah, it's going to shift around.
No doubt. By the way, let's talk about one of our sponsors as well while we're right here on this Saturday Nightcap live on college basketball coast to coast. If you're seeing us on YouTube, on Facebook, on social media, thank you. If you're hearing us after the fact on podcast on Sunday and beyond, we were live on Saturday. We are a podcast as well with college basketball coast to coast, but we're live here on all the social media platforms as well. And one of our sponsors are these guys, Ari, Go Sleeves. We love Go Sleeves and the fact that they have kinesiology technology for your knees, your elbows, your calves with these sleeves. Therapeutic value, helping you with recovery, helping you with inflammation. The video audience is seeing it on the screen right now, what these therapeutic sleeves do for your knees, your calves again, for your elbow. If you are a runner, if you are a biker, if you play tennis, golf, weekend basketball, pickleball, Ari, is big. Go Sleeves and the kinesiology technology. We're seeing it right now on the screen. They are sponsors of what we do on college basketball coast to coast. Yes, you got mobility for all. It helps with the inflammation. Most importantly, it helps with recovery. It is go time with Go Sleeves, and we love talking about them. And by the way, there is a promo code as well. Get a discount on your Go Sleeves with GoSleeves.com/TJ. Just use my initials, all right, TJ. It's that simple. And you take a discount off of the Go Sleeves, the therapeutic knee or elbow sleeve or the calf sleeve. They've got a shirt coming for your back to help you with your back. They've also got a neat prototype that helps you kind of like a pair of shorts that help your hamstrings therapeutically and with inflammation and the warmth for the hamstrings while you're working out, while you're running, playing pickleball, basketball. Go Sleeves. GoSleeves.com to find out more. And again, for the therapeutic value and more, it's go time with Go Sleeves. Why don't we do this? Let's talk more about Tennessee, their exciting win over Alabama, the strength of the SEC, better than you and me going over it. This guy was in the Thompson Bowling Arena in Knoxville earlier this evening for the Tennessee 79-76 win on the last second shot. Vince Ferrara, morning host in Knoxville, part of the Vol Radio Network. He was right there on scene. Let's let him describe that, the significance of the win, obviously, for Tennessee, the strength of the SEC, and much more. Let's go to that right now on college basketball coast to coast. All right, as mentioned, you were right there, Vince Ferrara, for the mayhem at the end of this and the Tennessee last-second three-point shot. Are your ears still ringing? They might be. I think I could hear the crowd. The ground might have been vibrating in East Tennessee, and I think you could hear the crowd all over the Southeast for that shot that Jahmai Mashack made, the three-pointer. What was it like right there, my friend, as we bring you in on college basketball coast to coast?
Yeah, great to be on with you, TJ, as always. And the crazy thing is that that arena at different points in the game was the loudest I had heard this season for sure. Ziegler made a three to tie it late, and that's probably the peak prior to Mashack. And then just the sequence was wild. Late in that game, Mark Sears stepped on Zakai Ziegler's heel, and he went to the court, and then they jumped on the ball and they called it a tie up. Well, that moved the possession arrow to Tennessee. So then when they got tied up again with 2 point or 3 point something seconds left, then Alabama got the tie. It should have been a foul before, but instead it was a tie up, moving the possession arrow. So because it was used there, then Alabama got the ball back. So Alabama gets the inbounds under Tennessee's basket with 3.8 to go because of that missed call in tie-ups. And then Alabama gets called for a 5-second call. And so then in the end, Tennessee's inbounding. They can't move it up. 3.8 to go. Jahmai Mashack comes open. Ziegler is covered. They can't get him the ball back. Rick Barnes is trying to call timeout. He doesn't get the timeout. And Mashack ends up taking the shot from the H in the Summit logo at midcourt, close to where Chris Lofton made his three against Kevin Durant and Texas years ago. That's legendary in Tennessee history. And that was the game-winning three. And another, go ahead, TJ.
What was your vantage point? I'm curious, as they inbounded and he came across midcourt, were you on that side of the court or were you on the other side of the court?
Yeah, the media now, they've moved us up to the top of the lower bowl behind the basket. So the basket where they inbound. So you just kind of see everything open up for Jahmai Mashack, and his three was on the opposite side where he made it. But and then obviously the team, everyone reacted. And here's another little element to it. Jahmai Mashack was my Vol Network pregame interview. I do all of them for football and men's basketball. The very first question on that interview, and I may try to get it and put it out on social media, I said, Jahmai, I'll be honest with you. This game has you written all over it. Great team, great player in Mark Sears, but then you want to show that you guys are great, you're up for the challenge, and then you're great. Is that fair? He said, absolutely. And he went through the list of the motivation of the big game and the big moment and prove himself, prove our team, and pretty cool that it kind of played out that way. A guy that's been criticized for not bringing a ton of offense was able to make that big shot. So it was just a perfect storm for him to hit that basket.
His only 3-point attempt of the game ended the game, won the game. And who knew? I've known this for years, that Vince Ferrara of 99 won the sports animal in Knoxville and the Vol Network has the Midas touch. It does not surprise me you had the Midas touch in the pregame. And by the way, you want to elaborate on the significance of this win, not just the rivalry with Alabama, not just two top 10, if not top 7 or 8 teams, but what else goes into this with that 3-point bomb for the win?
So, first of all, Alabama had 9 straight games where they scored 85 points or more on the road this year. 9 straight games, 85 or more on the road, and they failed to get to that. So that was the first time that those two had met as top 6 teams. But Rick Barnes now is 10th in wins with that win. That was number 830. Rick Barnes is 5-0 in AP top 10 home games as Tennessee's head coach. Think about that. Top 10 teams at home, 5-0 against great teams. He's 9-1 against top 10 teams at home overall with 8 straight wins. And he's 8-0 at home against AP top 6 teams. So these are great teams that go to Knoxville, and more often than not, he gets the win. That's the home court. That's Barnes. That's them having really good teams every year.
And again, they found a way. Alabama was rolling to the point total thing. They had 62 points because I was keeping track of this with 10 minutes to go. And then obviously end up getting only, 13 the rest of the game in the final 10 minutes.
Some of it lead fairly late in the second half.
And some of it self-inflicted, bad free throw shooting, couple of crucial turnovers late in the game. And what a gauntlet for them. While we just do a sidebar, they played Kentucky a week ago, Mississippi State midweek, Now this game, then Florida, then at Auburn, then the SEC tournament. I don't know what they're going to have left in the tank. I don't know what let's segue. I don't know what anybody at the end of this league and in that tournament is going to have anything left for the NCAA tournament. I say that sort of seriously, but I mean, good Lord, the end of this SEC schedule and the SEC tournament just overall, it is going to be a brawl, as I keep saying in Nashville. Can you pick it up on that with whoever comes out of it?
Doubt. And look, TJ, the SEC tournament is such a fun event normally. And then this year you add the element of the best league in college basketball, the depth, and then so many teams going to be desperate for either seeding or just getting in the NCAA tournament. It's going to be a gauntlet. That's another big significance of this game is it puts Tennessee in a much better position for a double bye and being a top 4 team. So that is huge because who's going to make a deep run if you have to play like Wednesday or Thursday? Good luck with that, playing great team after great team. It's just it would be too difficult. So I think that's another part of the significance of it. It depends on the timing of it. Who's already in a really good position, they get bounced quickly, then it's not as big a deal. Who has to be so desperate that they maybe get to the weekend and win a bunch of games, but then what's left in the gas tank? But these teams have been playing gauntlets all the time. Some just have it later than others. Tennessee has at Ole Miss and then Carolina at home. So it's much different than what Alabama has. That's because Tennessee's played a bunch more of those elite programs at the top, or earlier in the season. So I think it's just going to be situational on how much it takes out of it. And there's really no track record one way or the other of, hey, you go through a run in a tournament and it wears you down, or it sets you up for success, and vice versa. I just think it's situational on the kind of team you have.
Again, Vince Ferrara has great perspective on the Tennessee Volunteers. He's with us on college basketball coast to coast in the Saturday nightcap here after Tennessee's dramatic 3-point shot win over Alabama 79-76 in Knoxville this afternoon. In your mind, Auburn clearly is going to be a number 1 seed. And then I guess there's debate about Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida up at are there going to be 2 SEC teams as top seeds in the NCAA tournament? Do you believe the SEC deserves more than that with a Duke, with a Houston, and a Michigan State in the mix? What do you think, Vince?
I think they definitely get 2. The question is do they get 3? Obviously, Florida's had a great season. They're in an excellent position, and Lenardi's had them consistently there. I think Auburn and Florida are the favorites to be the 2 for the SEC. And then it's just a matter of whether it's Tennessee, whether it's Alabama. If Alabama turns it around and say beats Florida and who knows what they do in the SEC tournament, you're telling me that's not going to raise their resume regardless of what Tennessee does?
Agreed.
And that could get involved into that spot. So, and then there's all the really good teams you play in the SEC tournament, however long you're there. So there's still opportunities for movement. I don't think they're going to say, no, we don't want more than 2 in the SEC. Right now, I would say 3, but I think 2 is the minimum for the SEC.
Love all of this with the insight, with the analysis. And again, Vince does a great job. He's the morning host. He's also part of the Vol baseball call when it's on. And as you mentioned, pre and post coverage on the Vol Network, football, basketball, women's basketball, also NCAA tournament worthy, one of the top teams in the SEC this year. My friend, I always love the breakdown here. The Bedlam at Thompson Bowling, they now call it the Food City, right? The Food City Center, but it's still Thompson Bowling Arena, as far as I'm concerned.
Technically, it's just a long name with both of them included.
I love it. I love it. And you've been doing this a long time. That's as wild a Saturday afternoon and Saturday night and finish against a rival like that as you've been part of. I'm not speaking for you. I would have to say, yes, it's got to be right up there, right? This win.
Yeah, it is. And look, the stakes that are there. And then the fact that Tennessee was playing uphill. And there's times where Tennessee has been in control, and then it almost got away from them. And then but they were uphill. They were down 9 in that game, and they had to really battle to get back. So that's what made it kind of, hey, they stole this type of feeling to some degree. Look, and Nate Oates was putting it on himself in the post game. He said it should have called timeout. Just a number of things that he put back on him. They had 2 timeouts when they got the 5-second call at the end. You got to use it. So he, and substitutions and things like that. So he was really trying to put it on himself.
It's only fitting. He's lamenting that he didn't call the timeout on the 5-second call, and Rick Barnes is thrilled that they didn't grant him trying to call timeout as
Right.
Mashack hit the 3, as you know.
Yeah.
It's wild on the ending. Listen, my friend, I know it's been a long day and a long afternoon for you. Thank you. Thank you for hanging with me on college basketball coast to coast. Keep up the great work on 99.1 The Sports Animal in Knoxville and the Vol Radio Network. Vince Ferrara, you're the best. Thank you, my friend.
You are the best. Anything for you, TJ. Appreciate you.
Vince joining us just a little earlier tonight as we're live on the Saturday Nightcap on college basketball coast to coast. And again, follow him at Vince Sports on social media, the Vol Network. What a scene for that win. And Ari, we can't emphasize this enough. I keep using the word brawl, the octagon, like UFC, whatever you want to call it, that SEC tournament. I want your take as we bring you back in, my wingman, Coach Ari. Might be better. You don't go there with the mentality you want to lose. Might be better, though, to maybe take an early loss on Friday and not play Saturday and Sunday and beat yourselves up further. Or maybe you disagree with that mentality.
It's tough because you want to continue. You want to have continuity, with the way that your team plays. I get it, like that mentality also, like, hey, save ourselves for the big dance, right? But that's tough. These guys are competitors. These kids are competitors. They want to win every game that they play. So, I don't think that they would trade in their trophy if they would win it and have to play. But what Vince was saying was absolutely right. It's going to be like getting that double bye is going to be a huge advantage for the teams that do get it. But it is going to be tough on itself. Is this going to be something where we're going to see that the treads on the tires be a little bit too smooth come tournament time because they beat each other so much?
And we haven't – can I interject? I don't mean to interrupt, but we haven't talked about Missouri is good.
Yep.
Vanderbilt is good. I mean, you got dangerous teams at this tournament. Texas A&M can probably get it back together. Arkansas had been playing well until they nosedived today against South Carolina. You legitimately have in the second tier 3 or 4 teams that can probably win a couple of games or maybe make a run in this. It just tells you how tough this conference is going to be on itself. Just to point this out, Alabama lost on the quarterfinal Friday last year, and then ended up making the Final Four. I'm not saying that it benefited them and that was the biggest reason why. It's just something to consider that, and they've had success. Nate Oates and company won the SEC tournament previously a couple of years ago. But if you're Bruce Pearl and you're Auburn and you don't have to play knockdown, drag out with Alabama, Tennessee, Florida in some combination on Saturday and Sunday, it may not be the worst thing in the world.
Probably not. No, I mean, and speaking of Texas A&M, I think their next game is Auburn. So, what
a gauntlet!
It's just a
and
gauntlet.
Again, Alabama's next game is Florida. Off the A&M win, and then after that, they're playing Auburn at Auburn to end the season before they ever get to Nashville.
So it's right, and it's look. I'm excited about conference tournament. I always love it. I think that we kind of overlook it every year until we actually get there. You're like, dang, this is some great basketball. You get some buzzer beaters. You get teams that make runs like NC State last year, obviously making that run and ended up in the Final Four. They wouldn't have made the tournament had they not won the ACC. So, could that happen with an SEC team? Who knows? Could Arkansas end up cutting the nets? I doubt it, because the top tier, especially like Auburn, it's just Tennessee and Alabama. Those teams are legit Final Four teams. Is a Missouri another team that we could talk about making the Final Four? Sure. Florida obviously is another team. They have a lot of guys. A lot of teams that can make it to the Final Four. And then they have a lot of teams, like you said, that's that second tier that can make it to the second
and we
weekend.
didn't even mention Ole Miss, Mississippi State.
Absolutely.
They can probably win a couple of games.
They can probably win
in
a couple
Nashville.
of games too. So it's a flooded conference. They've just been killing each other the whole year. I expect the SEC to be beyond Thunderdome. We just need some Tina Turner and some.
I love it. Mel Gibson.
We don't need another hero, right?
3 years ago, we go the late Tina Turner and Mel Gibson.
Yes.
I love it. By the way, we got some people commenting and getting in here. Our buddy Chris William Wynn says, what about my namesake TJ Otzelberger and Iowa State? They beat Arizona tonight. That's who he's talking about in Ames, Iowa tonight. Big 12 is going to be wild too, not only with Houston, but with Iowa State. How about Texas Tech that beat Kansas today? Arizona in the mix. It's going to be fascinating to watch the Big 12 play out in Kansas City. But Iowa State needed that game tonight against Arizona. They've been struggling.
They've had injuries, significant injuries so far. But today was a must win just for theirs. So not to make the tournament, but to kind of get off the mat. So they needed this win, just to kind of get back to that momentum, because they had a great start to the season, and even at the beginning of Big 12 play. But they've had a couple of bumps and bruises here, again, banged up a little bit. But that's another team that's a Final Four worthy team. Very well coached team. Again, probably the coach is known. Your namesake is known for great defense. This is one of the teams that he actually has pretty damn good offensive, pretty damn good offensive.
And they had a bad loss, an awful loss at Oklahoma State Tuesday night. Now they've gotten a little healthier this week, but to come off that loss and beat Arizona at home was big for them. For talking about Iowa State. By the way, John is back in asking about thoughts on Kansas. Here's a thought. They look done. Period. They look done. The way that Utah buried them a couple of weeks ago, Texas Tech beating them in Lawrence today. Would you agree with that, Ari, right now? You never say never, but this does not look like a team that is ready to make a move in the Big 12 or in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and right now it doesn't, but don't underestimate Bill Self. You just never can underestimate.
We keep saying that, but for this team, for this version, aren't they running out of opportunities? They've got Houston next at Houston. Hello.
They can still lose that, but then they can make a run in the Big 12 tournament and then make a run in the NCAA tournament. But I agree with you. The way that they're playing, there's not a cohesive unit at this point. They seem to be kind of not together. So that's where Bill Self has to kind of figure it out. They were the preseason number one team in the country, if I'm not mistaken. And they're nowhere to be found in the top 25. They're still going to make the NCAA tournament, but they're going to be an 8 or 9 seed, possibly a 10 seed. Can
you imagine them?
They're just sliding. They just keep sliding. Can you
imagine them in the dark jerseys on day one as the 9 seed or the 10 seed, like you just said, for game one?
Well, what were Danny and the Miracles? What were they ranked? What were they?
And I want to say they were like 7th or 8th or something.
Right, they were like
that.
a 7 or 8 seed. Right,
but a Bill Self team.
They ain't got Danny Manning on his team.
That's right. Bill Self team going to be in the dark jerseys on game number 1.
They could
maybe in an 8-9 game where they're playing a number 1 seed on game 2 if they win.
They probably end up playing Memphis in the first one.
You never know. All right, so we've given you a bunch. On deck, Matt Zemek will be here in a couple of moments. The West Coast Bureau Chief, again, has been monitoring everything west of the Mississippi, I think, tonight for us. He's going to check in on college basketball coast to coast. We are live. TJ Rives, Ari Russell with you. We'll be here for a few more minutes. By the way, we are also sponsored by our friends at Ticket Smarter, Coach Ari. We encourage the audience here to utilize Ticket Smarter for the upcoming conference tournaments, for the NCAA tournament. They have got the best secondary market pricing that you're going to find out there for all these conference tournaments. It is going to be one heck of a ticket at the Garden with way that St. John's has played and the UConn fans that are there. SEC tournament that we're talking about in Nashville, the Kentucky fans always gobble up the tickets there. Big 10 tournament in Indianapolis, Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. use TicketSmarter. TicketSmarter mobile app. Your purchase is safe, secure. It's guaranteed. Best pricing on the secondary market. I said that already. And take $20 off of an order of $300 or more with TicketSmarter with the promo code COAST20. COAST20 gets you $20 off your order. Use that code as much as you want all the way through March. The NCAA tournament games, the Final Four games. Use our promo code COAST20. TicketSmarter, the TicketSmarter mobile app. Again, it takes you a couple of minutes to sign up. You're right there, able to purchase, and use our promo code for the discount. Think smarter, TicketSmarter. Get in the game with TicketSmarter as well. All right, so with the plugs and the promos out of the way, shall we go to the West Coast Bureau Chief, Matt Zemek? Why not? Hanging with Ari Russell and me here on a Saturday night, on the Saturday nightcap on college basketball coast to coast. We bow to you, Matt Zemek of the USA Today family of websites, TrojansWire.com covering USC, CollegeWire.com as well. Great historian of the college hoop game nationally. As a longtime national college basketball writer. How am I doing on the promos for Matt Zemek? Good to have you, brother, hanging out here with us on college basketball coast to coast. How are things on a Saturday night?
Well, USC's enjoying some very good juju right now. Trojans took UCLA to the woodshed in Westwood, so they're Big Ten champions, and they're likely a #1 seed. So all is well in Troy right now.
And Juju Watkins is the real deal Holyfield. We keep saying this. Pay attention here for all the talk about South Carolina, the defending champs, or Paige Beckers in UConn and LSU. Juju all the way out west. It's a lot of fun, Matt Zemek. You were just covering this game tonight and writing about her all throughout the season.
Yeah, they put up some murals of her in downtown LA, and so she then comes into Poly Pavilion and hangs 30 on the #2 team in the country. UCLA was 28-1 entering this game. So, when you get a mural of yourself in downtown LA, you better rise, and Juju definitely did that.
Love it. All right, I got Ari Russell hanging with me here. It's like a little Final Four reunion when we were all in Phoenix together. Speaking of reunions, you and my wingman, Jason Powers, who is, again, otherwise occupied the night he's usually here. He's in Phoenix working with the NFL Flag Football Initiative. He's not able to be with us tonight. You and he broke bread without us. We missed out on a seat at the table for lunch for some good vittles in Phoenix. But I'm glad you two got together and got to go over it all in person. We have the commonality of college basketball coast to coast, my friend.
Well, hey, last year at the Final Four media room in Glendale, we had bananas and orange slices. So I mean, we didn't break bread together, but we broke fruit together.
Yeah, we did break fruit together. I think I do recall that with the media room in Glendale for all of that. All right, I love it. Okay, so just say something about the Big 12. Again, we've been talking about Houston. They locked up the outright Big 12 title with the win today over Cincinnati. Iowa State needed that game tonight with Arizona, and they got it at home. We were talking just before you came on, how broken is Kansas, in your opinion? Takes on the Big 12, on anything Big 12, including what Houston did today.
Well, the insight I've been stressing in terms of like a main NCAA tournament plot point is how you have some blue blood programs in the mid-level seed range. So like Kansas, if Kansas was a 7 previously, Kansas looks like an 8-9 game right now. And so that means, Kansas is going to be in the path of a 1 seed. Now, of course, Kansas might not even get out of the 8-9 game. But like now you could have Kansas and UConn and Gonzaga all in different 8-9 games. And that brings up a plot point unto itself. Would CBS and Turner want 2 of those 8 or 9 seeds to go against each other so that you guarantee a high-end matchup against a 1? Or are you going to put them in 3 or 4 different regions? Because right. You could have Kansas, UConn as an 8-9 game right now. That is a legitimate bracketing possibility. Sure. That would be allowable within the bracketing rules and constraints. So Kansas versus UConn in Duke's region. Who says no? Wow. Who says no?
That's an 8 o'clock game. That's an 8 o'clock.
Oh yeah, put it in prime time. Put it in prime time. If you're CBS on that, and again, we keep talking about they do look at this. They do peek at it. They try to keep track of what's that second round matchup. And for example, one of their policies, one of their procedures is they try to keep conference teams from playing each other through the first 2 rounds. Now, it's going to be very difficult with the SEC having 57 teams in the tournament to keep that from happening, but they would likely, in an 8-9 scenario like you're painting that hypothetical, if Kansas is in it, keep them away from Houston as the 1 seed in the same bracket. They try to avoid that. So let's see. It would be the same thing with a UConn. If you had St. John's as the number 1 seed, it would be the same thing with the Big Ten team if you had Michigan State as the number 1 seed, or an ACC team if you have Duke as the number 1 seed. Same thing that they would do on that. Back to Houston, though. Do they look the part? I want both of your opinions. Matt Zemek, do they look the part of a Final Four team? And do they deserve a number 1 seed right now?
I'll tackle the second part first. They're increasingly looking like a number 1 seed. And one of the reasons why Houston's in a good position for the 1 seed right now, you don't have a West Coast powerhouse in position to be a 1 seed. You don't have an elite Arizona team, UCLA, Gonzaga, San Diego State. None of them are in the discussion for a 1 seed. So if it's a 50-50 call, Houston probably gets the 1 seed in the West, because that just makes the most natural travel logistical arrangement. Instead of sending like Alabama to the West Regional, you have Houston there. It's just a better fit. And a lot of people will say, and I agree, that it's less about being a 1 seed. It's more about the bracket path you get and the travel. So like if you told Alabama fans right now after the loss to Tennessee, hey, you're going to be a 2 seed, but it's going to be in the South, and you're going to get the more manageable. You're going to avoid Auburn and Duke. You're going to get a non-Auburn, non-Duke number 1 seed in your region. You tell that to an Alabama fan right now, they'd say, you know what? On balance, that might matter more than being a number 1 seed. So that's part of the calculus there. So I think Houston being the 1 seed in the West specifically, like that door is open for Houston right now. And I think if the Cougars make the Big 12 final and they take care of their remaining regular season games next week, they should be good to go for a 1 seed. And then the fact that Alabama and Tennessee and Florida are beating each other up in this SEC round robin, that probably means that Houston's going to get one of those 1 seeds, and that the SEC is not going to get 3. The SEC is probably going to get 2. Could get 3. Now maybe they'll be able to distribute the wins evenly, but the most likely outcome I would say right now is that the SEC gets 2 1 seeds and Houston gets that 4th one along with Duke from the ACC.
Love Matt's insight. Ari, you got anything from Matt Zemek here tonight as we're going over some of the games this evening, et cetera? Anything, Ari, here on this? Or you want to jump in on the Houston 1 seed? What do you want to do? Go.
I think they're pretty close to having that 1 seed locked up at this point. And like you said, the West, the logistics of it most likely is the case, but also just kind of like the continuity of their wins. I mean, it's even though it's not as tough as the SEC is at this point, I mean, they just won. I think they're at like 20 out of 21 or 21 to 22 at this point. It's something that is significant that has to be looked at, considering that the Big 12 is probably going to get 8 teams, maybe 9 teams in, most likely 8 teams in. So that's a lot of wins against a lot of tournament teams that they're getting in. Not saying that the SEC is, we all know that's a much tougher conference than the Big 12 is, but the Big 12 isn't a slouch at this point, and they're winning against everybody in that conference. And they have a huge lead. I mean, they locked it up I think they locked up it tonight.
Correct. Outright today. Yep.
But significant lead to have that already locked up before.
Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about, to your point, they beat Texas Tech at Texas Tech earlier this week. Right. And about 2 weeks ago, they beat Arizona at Arizona, and they have a win at Kansas. Again, it bears repeating, this team has not lost a true Big 12 road game for going back to last season. They have won the last 12 Big 12 road games. Houston, we're talking about.
Yeah,
with the slate of teams they've beaten, Ari.
At this point, I mean, it's really hard to knock them off just because the SEC teams are beating each other and having losses. You know, Florida's loss at Georgia, even though, you know, that's a tough place to play in general, and kind of they were due for that type of loss, I think. And they were getting killed, and they came back and almost won that game. But I think that actually slid Florida back significantly because, you know, a 1 seed is supposed to win those games, and Houston is winning all the games, those tough road games, that the trap road games for a better way to kind of put it. And they're not getting trapped. So I think you have to kind of put them ahead of, you know, a third possible SEC team, as good as the SEC team is. And as Matt, what you said, I don't think an Alabama or a Florida is going to be mad to be in that kind of that side of the bracket, to be a 2 seed. If it means less travel, less miles to fly back and forth. I mean, flying does take a toll physical. You know, the shorter the flight is much easier to kind of to do that. These are
Let me interject.
Guys.
I know I keep interjecting. Alabama last year went all the way out to Spokane.
Right.
And won and stayed in the West and came all the way to Los Angeles and won. And then eventually came home for a couple of days and came all the way back to Arizona. But you were making that point, Matt, about if you can avoid being shipped out, even if your seed is one peg down, et cetera, you might want that. But that's the case with Alabama last year on the travel. Listen, we're going to be here for a couple more minutes. Matt, what else? Anything else significant in the West here this afternoon or tonight that you want to hit on? We love you as the West Coast Bureau Chief to balance it out. No East Coast bias here on college basketball coast to coast. Matt, what else you got? Anything else?
Yeah, so 4-bid Mountain West keeps making forward progress. San Diego State surviving the road trip to Laramie and Wyoming, and Boise State was in a dogfight with Fresno State. A loss would have been a catastrophe. Boise State escapes that trip to Fresno, gets the win. So like that agenda, getting 4 teams from the Mountain West, that definitely moved forward this week. Still plenty of work to be done. Like the Aztecs and Boise, they're not locks, but they definitely moved forward. And especially when you look at the carnage in the ACC, in the SEC, with Texas and Arkansas face planting, Nebraska booting away a win against Minnesota at home, and Nebraska and Ohio State are going to be playing each other, double rubble bubble trouble next week. So the way the bubble has been shaping up, Mountain West getting 4 bids, much better odds of that. And then when I came on, Gonzaga was leading San Francisco by about 10 points. And there's history there.
17. It's now 46-29 headed to halftime. So they have pulled away, and go ahead and pick up with your point.
Yeah, so tonight there was history potentially in the making. It looks like history's not going to happen, but a San Francisco win tonight would have meant that Gonzaga would not get the bye into the semifinals of the West Coast Conference tournament. It would have been the first time ever that the Zags would have failed to get that multiple bye into the semis of their conference tourney. And when you consider why it's Gonzaga versus St. Mary's in the WCC tournament final nearly every year, it's because they're getting those byes into the semis as the top 2 seeds. So San Francisco had a chance to be the 2 seed with a win tonight over Gonzaga, and so San Francisco had a chance to get all that added rest, watch Gonzaga slave away in a quarterfinal, and then maybe get into the WCC final, create some bracket chaos, steal a bid. So obviously that's not likely to happen. But that was a big story tonight going into San Francisco Gonzaga.
And we should say, again, the podcast audience knows what happened in the second half. San Francisco could maybe turn it on and win in the second half, but Gonzaga has played a really good first half, and they lead significantly at halftime in that game. It is interesting that in the 25 years or 26 years that Mark Few has been the coach at Gonzaga, they've never had more than 3 losses in the conference. They've got 4 right now, 4 losses in the conference. And some of that is that Oregon State and Washington State are in the conference this year. Santa Clara's a little better. Santa Clara beat Gonzaga. Oregon State beat Gonzaga. So we'll keep an eye on the Zags. They're going to be in the NCAA tournament. St. Mary's is the regular season champs. They're going to be in the NCAA tournament. Does a third team bid steal out of the WCC tournament or not? Also in the West, of note, we mentioned the Arizona loss tonight to Iowa State. Iowa State beating them decisively. By the way, St. Mary's is battling Oregon State in the final minute. They lead by 68-62. Again, you know these finals if you're with us on Sunday in podcast form. We don't know the finals while we do the show live. BYU, Matt Zemek has destroyed West Virginia. What was a fairly close 25-19 game is now 70-43. Hello. They have blown it wide open. BYU has probably punched their ticket, all but punched their ticket at large. Would you agree with that, Matt? And Ari, maybe you've got a thought on the Mormons. A win at Arizona for them that they needed. Big win here tonight. They beat Kansas recently. Thoughts on BYU from both of you?
I'll just offer a quick thought, and that is BYU, ticket punched. That's a lock. And so I think that BYU's probably played its way all the way up to an 8-9 game. So, you're thinking about those 8-9 games. Gonzaga, BYU. How does that sound in an 8-9 game?
Ari Russell, they've got 4 quad one wins, the Mormons.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know what happened in that game. Has West Virginia been playing with 4 guys like a hockey power play? Because the game was fairly close, and now it's 27-point advantage for BYU. They've shown some explosiveness tonight. Anything on any of this about the West, about Gonzaga or any of the other Western teams, Ari, that strikes you? We didn't even really talk about Oregon. We've been talking some about them. Keep an eye on them in the West. Ari, anything else that we've left out about the Western teams?
Well, I mean, going back to the Mountain West, that's going to be the theme as far as the four going in, and George Mason losing today helps the Mountain West. They lost to Duquesne. That was a bad loss, right?
Wow.
So that probably knocks them out of an at-large bid, I think, unfortunately, because they're actually a good team that could win a few games in the tournament, as with VCU. So at this point, there's no margin of error for teams like George Mason because they're not going to win the regular season at this point. So there's no margin of error for them. So that helps them. Teams like SMU losing today helps the Mountain West, helps Boise and San Diego State, right? So it looks better and better. Texas, as you mentioned, losing. Nebraska losing. A lot of these teams that are still kind of on that bubble that are
Arkansas losing.
A lot of these teams that are right there in the last 4 out and the last 4 in and the next 4 out, like, to me, it's hard to argue against the Mountain West having less than 4 teams at this point if those teams continue to handle the business that they need.
I mean, New Mexico looks like the top team. Utah State right there. Those two teams are in.
Those 2 teams are locked.
So now the question is it 4 or is it only 3? And we don't really know what the committee's thinking, right, Ari? I mean, we see this every year.
Right, every
year. 4, or have they been thinking it's 3 all along? I don't know.
They could, but again, like everybody else is stepping in front of the subway train, so it's it's helping them. So that's one of the things. Like, you can't, like, to me, like, teams that completely lost it unless they win their conference tournament, and Wake Forest is done. Like, forget it. Throw them in the garbage. You're in the NIT, right? SMU is done, unless they win the conference tournament, right? So the ACC has become a great gift to the Mountain West, in my opinion. They just have been gifting them the whole year long. And to the credit of Boise and San Diego State, they're handling their business that a bubble team should be to deserve to make it into the dance. You have to look at it. Which teams are playing their way into the tournament and which way teams are playing their way out of the tournament. A lot of teams are not getting the wins that they need to play into the tournament. Arkansas, what a terrible loss today. They could have continued the path in their argument today, losing to South Carolina. That's inexcusable. That's a loss that they could not have. And they still had it. And yet there's so much in the SEC for them to make up the ground for it. Big Ten, to a lesser extent, has that as well. But again, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm hoping that the Mountain West gets 4 teams. You know, I want to see a team like Drake make it to the NCAA tournament because they deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. They're a good enough team to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. And I just hope that, you know, that conference always has crazy conference tournaments all the time, and some of the craziest moments that have ever happened in their conference. So I would hope that doesn't happen to them and they win it, they get locked in. But you know, again, Mountain West deserves 4 in my opinion. I think the Big East has got 4, but Xavier and Villanova really have a lot more work to do. ACC's got 3, and there's mountains of work that everyone else has to do in that one.
We see some people that are watching us as well. Chris loves your phrase, Matt Zemek, on the double bubble rubble trouble. Yeah, do try saying that 5 times fast. Lisa watching says, I love bubble time. Yep, with all of these teams and all of these games.
When they talk about expanding the tournament, by the way, sorry to interrupt, but when they talk about expanding the tournament, like you have to stop because look at these teams that are this
exactly.
Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to see Wake Forest in the NCAA tournament. You know, I just
does Texas look like an NCAA tournament team? To your point, I mean that's what we're debating now down at the bottom. Does North Carolina? I know they've won a bunch of games against teams in the ACC that are bad. Why do we keep going over this? Matt knows I'm going to need some aspirin coming up. If we keep going over this, that we don't need 8 more teams. We don't. Nope. Go ahead, Matt. What else? What else you want to add real quick?
Yeah, well, as the West Coast bureau chief, I need to add one more team to the mix, and that is UC San Diego, the Titans. You know, not the San Diego Toreros, but the UC San Diego Tritons. Eric Olin, one of the breakout stars in the coaching world this season. UC San Diego is right in the same league as Drake. The team that Ari very rightly, appropriately said, you know, like that's a team that deserves to be in. Drake's barely lost any games all season. I believe it's 26-3 heading into a Sunday game against Missouri State, and UC San Diego's similarly been crushing it in the Big West. And I hope they win their conference tournament so that we don't have to worry about this going into Selection Sunday. But if UC San Diego and also Drake don't win their conference tournaments, like they deserve to be in the tournament a million times more than Texas, than Arkansas, than Ohio State, than Nebraska, all these 13, 14 lost teams. And, you know, we talk about, Oklahoma has more quad 1 wins than UC San Diego. Well, yeah, right, of course, because Oklahoma gets to play like 20 quad 1 games and it wins 4 of them. So more quad 1 wins. Like that is such an artificial thing when you get 15, 17, 20 more bites at the apple. Something has to be done, and I really hope we're not dealing with a world in which Drake and UC San Diego get left out while Oklahoma and Texas and Ohio State get in. And last week on College Basketball Coast to Coast, I made the point. I'm against tournament expansion if it means letting in a 14-loss power conference team. But if there was a way to say, hey, we're going to add 4 spots solely for the Drakes, for the UC San Diegos, for the other high-achieving mid-majors that don't win their conference tournaments, if we just added 4 spots for those teams, I don't think anyone says no, because those are the teams that usually get the short end of the stick.
I don't disagree.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right, but yeah, they're definitely who says no. And it's the committee.
But as we discussed,
no, because they don't see that, because they're like, why the hell are we going to let these poor?
That's right, Ari. As we discussed, the ideal that he's going for and practicality and what they would actually do are two different things. And Matt knows that. They're going to put Arkansas and North Carolina and Oklahoma and Nebraska and those teams in if given the opportunity out of the Power 5, or a Xavier, et cetera, if given the opportunity with an expanded field. Hey, just real quick here before we're gone, fascinating on all of this. I want your take, Matt, real quick. Do you believe right now Auburn, Duke, and Houston have secured number 1 seeds? Or do you believe that it's only Auburn and Duke that have secured number 1 seeds? What do you believe with a week or so to go here in the regular season for the Power 5 conferences. What do you believe?
Okay, when we use the term lock, all right, what does that mean? It means you can lose all of your remaining games and it doesn't affect you. That's what a lock means. So by that standard, Auburn and Duke are locks for number 1 seeds. And it's not that Houston hasn't done enough. It's just that Alabama, Tennessee, Florida all have really good resumes and can play their way onto the 1 line because they're going to get so many high-end opportunities. So it's not that Houston's failing. No, it's just that Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, they all will get chances to get these huge quad 1A wins at the top of the bracket to play their way above Houston if things shape out. So it's fluid. It's Tennessee, Auburn, or Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, Houston, those 4 teams for the 2 remaining number 1 seeds. But I do like Houston's chances because the SEC teams are going to beat each other up. So it's likely that only one of those teams is going to separate itself, and then Houston probably gets that 1 seed in the West. And by the way, Chris William Wynn, who's been active in the chat, he asked, hey, if Michigan State runs the table and wins the Big Ten tournament, can Michigan State get that 1 seed in the West? I would say no. I think Michigan State's ceiling is a 2. And the main reason, Chris, is that Michigan State lost to TJ's Memphis Tigers out in Maui. And also Michigan State beat North Carolina in Maui. If North Carolina was a number 1 seed level team, that might have helped Michigan State ascend to the 1 line. But because North Carolina is a bubble team, Michigan State did not derive as much value from that non-conference win. So Michigan State's non-con schedule did not have the heft that you see with the other contenders for 1 seed. So Michigan State and St. John's, their ceiling is a 2. I don't think either of them can rise to the 1 line.
To your point, Michigan State non-conference strength of schedule is 105. So is that worthy of a number 1 seed? They do have 7 quad 1 wins. And by the way, they have had a couple of massive wins as of late, including winning at Michigan, winning at Illinois, beating Purdue. They play Wisconsin tomorrow, coming up in about 13 hours, as a matter of fact, as we do this live on Saturday night, 1:30 Eastern time, 12:30 Central time in Madison. It's Michigan State and Wisconsin. But stay tuned because they still play Michigan again at the end of the year, and they still have the Big Ten tournament. That Michigan State resume could get to the 1 line. I'm saying that it could. It's not there yet. But if they beat Wisconsin and Michigan and then go on and win the Big Ten tournament, getting a couple of more big wins, they might be right in position. You don't know. We'll see. That's what makes it great here.
I would just say this then. In order for that to happen, in order for Michigan State or also St. John's to get to the 1 line, there's only one way that can happen. And that is if Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, the SEC teams, because, at least one of those SEC teams is going to win a game because they're playing each other.
They have to play each other. Right.
So what would need to happen is Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama would all need to lose in their SEC tournament quarterfinals. That's how Michigan State or St. John's could ascend to the 1 line. But assuming you have at least 2 of those 3, Florida, Tennessee, Bama, playing each other in an SEC semifinal, then that punches the ticket for a 1 seed for the winner. They all have to lose in the SEC quarters. That's the only way it happens.
By the way, on Sunday, also in the Big Ten, it is Illinois that's had some problems, including getting blown out recently by Duke. Illinois at Michigan. Michigan off the last second 3 to beat Rutgers. How about Michigan State off the half-court shot to beat Maryland? I mean, Ari, you're in that area. You spent a ton of time in Washington, D.C. Maryland is having such a great year. They had the Scott Van Pelt of ESPN, SVP, right there at courtside pumping his fist until, oh, my God, there's the 3 for the loss from midcourt, and Michigan State won the game. And now Sparty's got to play Wisconsin coming on Sunday. This is going to be fascinating in the Big Ten and the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis. It's going to be fascinating, Ari, real quick.
Always fascinating. Great competitive, especially, at the top and playing on the road in this conference. I mean, between Michigan State, and they have real home court advantages in the Big Ten. There's some certain places, but you have multiple of them there. You have obviously Michigan State Breslin Center, one of the toughest places to play, right? Madison, Wisconsin. The fact that Oregon was able to steal a win the other, there's another team, a tough place to play is at Oregon. But Madison is another tough place to play. Illinois traditionally has also been another one of those dead zones to play. This is a great game coming up. Well, Wisconsin was looking at one point until they lost to Oregon as a team that was really on the rise. That kind of brought them back down to earth for me. Saw kind of a few holes in their game, in that contest. The Big Ten in Indianapolis is going to be wild as it normally is, way up in the air. It's again, super conference, big conference. There's a lot of those teams kind of, that, like you said, Ohio State and Nebraska and Indiana, they're going to have
Purdue.
Purdue is in. I'm talking about the teams that are kind of at the lower tier that are trying to get in. Those teams are going to have to make some noise in Indianapolis in order for them to really solidify themselves.
Hey, Matt, UCLA playing at Purdue. Here we go back to what you cover with UCLA Wire, the USA Today family of websites. Matt's got like a deck of cards of all of what he's covering with the USA Today websites. UCLA battled hard. Purdue needed that win. They got the win. But what about UCLA and Oregon as kind of wild cards, speaking of playing cards, in this Big Ten tournament? They can maybe do damage also, right, in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, UCLA and Oregon are weird teams, man. Oregon just slow start today against USC, trailed 15-4 early, now was able to work out of that deficit, but we've talked about this a lot. Oregon with the slow starts, you can't just keep digging yourself a hole early. Oregon's an amazing last 3-minute team. Jackson Shellstat is a late game shot maker deluxe, but Oregon has just been fooling around for a lot of this season, and Oregon will need to be more consistent going forward. And then with UCLA, here's the thing, and Bruin fans, like I'm following the UCLA people who cover the team, who follow the team, they are just at their wits' end. Why is Mick Cronin not playing Ade Mara extended minutes all the time? He is their most impactful player, not necessarily their best player, but his length, his defense, his rebounding, his shot deterrence, they're all so disruptive. When he plays, great things happen, and yet Cronin just wildly varies his minutes. Like, he's not giving Ade Mara consistent extended minutes, and UCLA is at its best when Mara is on the floor. So who knows what Mick Cronin's thinking? But if Mara gets more minutes, UCLA could be a very thorny and dangerous team, probably in that 6 to 7 seed range at this point.
Yep, and he's a veteran coach. We'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun with all these tournaments. Boys, it is March. We're past the midnight hour for Ari and me in the Eastern time zone. That means it's March the 2nd already. It's still March 1st. They're still rocking out in Phoenix. Is there any confirmation?
We're in the future.
Yeah, we are in the future for Matt. Is there any confirmation that you're regrouping with Powers for a Saturday night out in the greater Phoenix area? We do not have confirmation that is happening. That's not necessary.
He's catching an early bird flight on Sunday, he told me, so no chance.
But that doesn't mean that he's going to bed tonight. Just may pull the all-nighter, go straight to the
I can show you how to miss a flight and get completely screwed over.
Yeah, that's true, too, from the Final Four. But in any event, so you guys have been chopping it up, and we've had a lot of fun here on this Saturday. Final thought from either one of you. We've got to get out of here. We've been here a while. Tonight on the Saturday Nightcap Live on College Basketball Coast to Coast, the live show. And if you're hearing us on podcast, you've been with us for a while, listening to anything else in closing here tonight, or are we good?
I just have one thing, and that is, Ari, I don't really disagree with the idea that Wake Forest and North Carolina are done as bubble teams. I don't really have an argument with that. I would only say that those two teams play Duke this next week. So they do have a chance to change the conversation. But assuming Duke beats those two teams, then that is definitely the nail in the coffin. Like Wake has to win at Duke on Monday to have any at-large shot whatsoever. Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. That's just the one extra note about those two ACC bubble teams.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had mentioned earlier while you were still watching the USC UCLA women's game, for Wake Forest, I just think that even if they were to beat Duke, maybe they're somewhat in the conversation, but they have too many bad losses in the ACC. I mean, they don't have many losses in the ACC, but they've already lost to like a 4-win NC State team. They have like 2 or 3 losses against the lower rung of their conference. That's inexcusable, where North Carolina doesn't have those losses per se. So I think that plays a role, but they both absolutely, if you want to put them in the conversation, they have to beat Duke, which, if I were a betting man, I wouldn't put that money on that.
And to your point, Wake Forest 70 in the net. The net is not everything, the NCAA power ranking, but they're 70 right now. They do have 3 quad 1 wins, but to Ari's point, they have 3 quad 3 losses as well, Wake Forest. So they got to have the Duke win and maybe another significant ACC tournament victory on the neutral floor. Just looking at North Carolina, they're 1-9 in quad 1 to the point. And again, it bears repeating, what that committee will do is they'll get down to the bottom final 2 or 3 teams, the 35th, the 36th team at large, and they will put up 4 teams with their resumes. They'll put up Arkansas, Wake Forest, let's say Drake if they don't get the automatic bid, and I don't know, somebody else, Texas. And then they'll discuss it, and then they'll vote. And they'll vote on a team to go in. And then they've got another slot, and they'll replace, let's say they vote, I can't even remember who I listed. Let's say that they vote North Carolina in. Well, now it's going to be Wake Forest and Texas and Drake, and they add Indiana as the next team that they discuss. They'll discuss out of these 4 teams, who are we voting in, and they'll pick one. And that's how they do it from a policy and procedure standpoint for the final 3 or 4 spots. That we're not in the room, but allegedly that's what they tell us, that's what they're doing with the last 3 or 4 spots. So it becomes a comparison. It becomes a comparison with 3 other teams in a pod, and then they vote. And all of that voting will be taking place 2 weeks from now on the weekend, with Selection Sunday night on the night of the 16th. We'll have a live show then as well. Guys, great stuff here tonight. Matt Zemek, thank you for hanging out live. Ari Russell, you've been with me for the duration. Ari has put up with me for the better part of 20 years, Matt Zemek. You and I are more recent than that. Ari's going back to like the second Bush administration and like before social media was a thing. Like, right, Ari? No Facebook, much less no Twitter, any of that.
I think like pre-smartphones.
I'm
BlackBerry era.
Pre-TJ having twins that are now almost 17 years old, Ari.
Right.
That's how long we've been around each other. It's crazy. But in any event, there we go. Ari, did you have a final thought? Anything else? I know you had the rebuttal there on the tournament. Anything else that we left out on this Saturday?
Like we're coming up on the last week of the regular season here. So this week is, huge, obviously, for the bubble teams that we mentioned. It's an ugly bubble this year. But outside of that, the bubble is ugly. We have to admit that. But everything else inside of it is beautiful. This is going to be an awesome tournament, I think. And I can't wait for the conference tournaments, because I think those are going to be a heck of a lot of fun as well.
I have taken off.
See what you did. Yes.
What I was wearing for the video audience, they see it, but for the podcast audience, they didn't see it. I've taken off the Tampa Bay Lightning hat, who've won 8 in a row in the National Hockey League, and put the Memphis hat on, because Memphis and UAB play on Sunday afternoon in the American Conference. Memphis leads the American. Memphis is in as an at-large team. UAB is a game behind. Is somebody else going to bid steal out of the American Conference by winning the conference tournament? If UAB were to beat my Memphis Tigers, I just verbalized that, they would now be in control of their own destiny, I believe, to win the regular season and to be the number 1 seed. The significance there is you're sitting back and waiting, and Memphis has now got to play a tougher semifinal game in the 2-3 spots. So we'll keep an eye Sunday on Memphis UAB. Memphis won the first matchup about 2 weeks ago in Memphis decisively. The Tigers right now, at 14-2 in the American, up a game on UAB, or 13-2, up a game on UAB. They play Sunday afternoon. We'll see what happens with Memphis as well. Anything else, boys? I think we're good here.
Yeah.
I agree. Chris William Wynn is saying 7 or 8 teams can win the national title. It might actually be like 9 or 10 teams that could win the national title.
I think there's like 16, 17 that can make the Final Four, but yeah. Like
something like that.
Yeah.
By the way, Lisa,
but I don't think
watching,
all the teams that can make the Final Four can win the national title.
Lisa watching in Memphis says, "Go Tigers, go!" for the Memphis Tigers for tomorrow. We'll see what happens with them. Ari's in the Northeast with St. John's with what they're doing. Matt's monitoring everything out west. I think we pretty well covered it on college basketball coast to coast. Thanks to Adam Zagoria with NJ.com and the Zags blog talking St. John's win. Vince Ferrara with us as well from the Sports Animal, the morning show, 99.1 FM in Knoxville and the Vols Radio Network. Thanks to Matt Zemek, TrojansWire.com for the USC coverage, CollegeWire.com, right, Matt, for the college basketball coverage. Ari Russell as well, helping us on college basketball coast to coast with the YouTube channel and the social media. Boys, thank you. Great stuff. We love it. Have a good night. We thank all the audience for watching. If you're in podcast form, it's a live show on the social media platforms on Saturday night on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you for finding us. If you haven't found the pod, subscribe to the podcast feed on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify. For now, that is it. We're done for a Saturday app. It's now March the 2nd in the East, and we've been breaking it all down on college basketball coast to coast.